He walked into the room quietly, like he was used to not being noticed. The space was large but tired. The walls were plain, the lights were soft, and the air felt heavy, like it held many memories that no one spoke about. People were scattered around, sitting in chairs, standing by the walls, or slowly walking past. Everyone was there, but no one truly felt present. Each person carried their own thoughts, their own worries, and their own silent pain. He looked like an ordinary person. Nothing about him stood out at first glance. His clothes were simple. His face was calm but tired. There was a quiet weight in his eyes, the kind that comes from years of carrying things alone. He didn't come to impress anyone. He didn't come to be seen. He simply wandered in, like someone looking for a place to rest their mind for a moment. In the corner of the room stood a piano. It was old, with small scratches on its surface, and a faded shine that showed it once mattered. It wasn't broken, just forgotten. People walked past it every day without a second look. It was seen as decoration, not something with a voice. He noticed it almost by accident. His eyes drifted toward it while everyone else stayed focused on their phones, their bags, or their thoughts. Something about it pulled him in. Maybe it reminded him of a different time in his life. Maybe it felt like something that understood silence the way he did. He moved slowly toward it, not wanting attention. Every step felt careful, like he didn't want to disturb the air. No one stopped him. No one asked what he was doing. No one even noticed him walking across the room. That's how invisible he felt in the world, like he could walk through spaces without leaving a trace. He stood in front of the piano for a while without touching it. His fingers hovered slightly above the keys, unsure if he should cross that invisible line. He hadn't played in a long time. Life had a way of pushing small passions into dark corners, replacing them with responsibility, stress, and survival. Music had become something far away for him, something that belonged to another version of himself. Around him, the room stayed the same. Low voices talking. Soft footsteps. Chairs shifting. The quiet hum of lights. But inside him, something was slowly changing. A gentle feeling, like a door cracking open in a place he had locked tight. He lowered himself onto the bench slowly. It made a quiet sound, but nobody reacted. The piano keys looked worn from years of use, but they still held their quiet strength. His hands rested on his knees for a moment. He took a slow breath. Not a dramatic one, just a real, tired breath from someone who hadn't truly let go of tension in a long time. He thought about walking away. He thought about how silly it might seem to sit there without a plan. He thought about how people might judge him if he made a mistake. But the room already felt heavy. It already felt silent in the worst way. And maybe one small sound wouldn't make things worse. His fingers slowly lifted and hovered over the keys again. This time, they were closer. He could feel the cool surface. It felt real beneath his skin, like touching something honest after a long time of pretending everything was fine. He pressed one key. The sound was soft. It wasn't loud or perfect. It didn't echo through the room like something dramatic. It was just a single note. Gentle, warm, and real. But it cut through the silence like a thin beam of light. At first, no one reacted. People were still in their own worlds. But that sound didn't disappear. It stayed in the air for a moment longer than expected, like it wanted to be heard. He sat still after pressing the key. His finger rested lightly on the surface. He didn't move. He didn't rush. He just listened. It felt like the sound had touched something deep inside him that he didn't know was still alive, eh? Few people in the room slowly looked up. Not because he was being loud, but because the sound felt different. It didn't feel like background noise. It felt like a question being asked without words. Someone shifted in their seat. Someone stopped scrolling on their phone. Someone paused mid-step. He pressed another key. This time, a little more confident. The sound was slightly brighter. It didn't intrude on the room. It gently joined it. He began to feel something loosen in his chest. The tightness he carried every day started to soften, just a little. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't magic. It was just a small human moment, the kind that quietly keeps people alive. In his mind, he wasn't thinking about music. He wasn't thinking about skill or performance. He was thinking about those things he never said out loud. The times he stayed strong when he wanted to break. The nights he stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. The moments when he felt completely invisible. He played another note, then another, slowly, carefully, like he was learning how to speak again. After years of silence, the room began to shift without anyone realizing how. The air felt softer. The harshness lifted slightly. It was as if the room itself was taking a small breath. He wasn't trying to change anything. He wasn't trying to create a scene. He was just letting his hands move the way his heart felt. That's what made it real. That's what made it honest. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he had to explain himself. He just played. And the room, without saying a word, began to listen. He kept playing, slow and gentle, like he was feeling his way through the keys instead of trying to control them. The sounds weren't perfect, but they were honest. Each note felt like a quiet step forward, and he didn't rush any of them. He let the silence between the notes speak to, at first. The people in the room didn't fully understand what was happening. They just felt something was different. The room no longer felt like a waiting place or a place to pass time. It felt like a place where something real was happening. A person standing near the wall slowly folded their arms, not out of defense, but out of comfort. Someone sitting near the door leaned forward slightly, paying attention without even realizing they were doing it. Faces began to soften. Eyes began to lift from screens. The music wasn't loud. It didn't demand attention. It invited it. He played another quiet pattern of notes. Simple, soft, repeating. It sounded like a slow heartbeat. The kind that makes people feel safe without knowing why. His shoulders started to relax. His breathing became easier. His hands stopped shaking. In his mind, memories started to rise. Not dramatic memories, just small human ones. The sound of rain against a window on a long afternoon. A quiet kitchen late at night. A warm cup of tea held in both hands. The feeling of sitting alone but not feeling lonely. The room began to reflect that feeling. People sat still. Not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. The air felt cleaner, lighter, like the weight that everyone brought into the room. It's becoming easier to carry. Someone nearby quietly turned off the sound on their phone. It was a small action, but it mattered. It showed respect without needing words. He pressed a slightly higher note, then returned to a lower one. His fingers moved carefully like they were walking across a calm lake. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply sharing something he had kept inside for too long. A person sitting in the back slowly crossed their legs and rested, their hands in their lap. Another person leaned back and closed their eyes just for a moment. No one spoke. No one wanted to interrupt what was happening. He felt a strange warmth inside his chest. Not loud happiness. Not excitement. Just a calm sense of being real. He wasn't invisible anymore. Not because people were staring at him, but because people were feeling him. He imagined the sound traveling, not just through the air, but through the people themselves. Like it was touching places in them that words could never reach. Places where stress lived. Places where sadness hid. Places where hope slept quietly. He paused for a second. The room held its breath. No one asked him to continue, but no one wanted him to stop. He played again. This time, the notes were closer together. Still soft, still gentle, but slightly more sure of themselves. It sounded like someone learning how to trust again after a long time of not trusting anything. A faint smile touched someone's face. Another person slowly sat up straighter, as if the music was lifting their posture without them noticing. A quiet hum of peace filled the room. He realized he wasn't afraid anymore. Not of mistakes. Not of being seen. Not of being judged. Even if he pressed the wrong key, it wouldn't ruin anything. This wasn't about skill. This was about feeling. He allowed his fingers to move more freely. They weren't shaking now. They weren't stiff. They flowed. The music sounded like simple thoughts turned into sound. He thought about how many times he had held things in. How many times he smiled when he didn't feel okay. How many times he told people He was fine when he wasn't. The piano was saying those things for him now. Quietly, safely, the room changed. It more with every note. The heavy energy that once filled the space began to lift. It didn't vanish completely, but it softened. It became lighter, easier to breathe in. Someone carefully adjusted their position in their seat, trying not to make noise. Someone else slowly rested their chin in their hand. Everyone moved like they were trying to protect the fragile beauty of the moment. He noticed that he wasn't alone anymore, not in the emotional sense. He felt connected to the room without having to talk. He felt understood without explaining anything. There was nothing flashy about what he was doing. No fast movements. No loud sounds. Just steady, honest music that carried real feelings. He stopped again for a brief second. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty silence. It was full. Full of emotion. Full of attention. Full of shared experience. Then he played a single note. Again, this one felt different. It felt like a beginning of something. New, and the people felt it too. The way he played started to change. Not in a big or sudden way, but in a quiet and honest way. His fingers didn't feel lost anymore. They felt like they finally understood where they wanted to go. Every key he touched felt more connected to his heart than his hands. The room felt different now. It no longer felt like a place people were stuck in. It felt like a space they had chosen to be in. The walls didn't seem so plain anymore. The air didn't feel so heavy. Something invisible had shifted, and everyone could feel it. He wasn't thinking about the people around him, but somehow he felt closer to them than he ever had before. He could sense their presence, their stillness, their quiet attention. It felt like they were all breathing at the same slow, calm rhythm. The music grew slightly fuller, not louder, but warmer. The notes connected more smoothly, like a story being told without words. It sounded like walking through a peaceful memory. Someone in the room slowly let their shoulders drop. Another person stopped tapping their foot and let it rest on the floor. Someone quietly folded their hands together. Small movements, but full of meaning. He began to feel things he had pushed away for a long time. Feelings he didn't let himself think about during busy days. The ache of missing people he never said goodbye to. The tiredness of always having to be strong. The fear of being forgotten. But instead of hurting, those feelings softened. The piano didn't judge them. The music didn't shame him. It just let them exist. The room reflected his inner change. A person by the window slowly turned their face toward the light. Someone sitting close to the wall drew a slow breath and held it for a second, then released it gently. No one spoke. No one wanted to. Talking would break the fragile reality that was forming. His posture changed without him noticing. He wasn't hunched forward anymore. He sat straighter. His shoulders were more open, like his body was starting to believe what his heart was feeling. The melody began to repeat, but it didn't feel boring. It felt comforting, like someone rocking back and forth gently, letting the world slow down. He thought about all the moments he felt out of place in life. The times he walked into rooms and felt too small. The times he wanted to say something, but stayed quiet. The times he felt like no one would understand even if he tried. Now he didn't need to explain anything. The music did that for him. Someone near the back of the room wiped their eyes. Not because they were crying loudly, but because something small had touched them. Another person took a slow breath and shook their hands slightly, as if letting go of hidden tension. The piano keys felt warmer under his fingers, or maybe it was just his imagination. Either way, they felt alive. They didn't feel cold or distant. He noticed how quiet the room had become. Not empty quiet, but respectful quiet. Even the small sounds of the building felt softer, like everything was trying not to disturb the moment. The notes he played became more confident. Not faster, not louder, but more certain. Like someone walking forward after years of standing still. He felt connected to something bigger than himself. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple truth that he wasn't alone in feeling tired, lost, hopeful, or scared. Everyone carried something. Everyone in that room understood pain in their own way. The music created a bridge between them. A person on the far side of the room leaned their head slightly to the side, listening more carefully. Someone else gently rested their hands on their knees. A quiet peace settled over them all. He smiled, but only slightly. It wasn't a wide smile. It was the kind of smile that comes from relief. The kind that says maybe things aren't as broken as they feel. He realized he wasn't performing anymore. There was no audience. There was only a shared moment. A shared pause from real life. Every note felt like a heartbeat, and the room was alive. His playing grew, more honest with every passing moment. It wasn't about the music anymore. It was about what lived behind the music. Every slow movement of his fingers felt like opening a door that had been closed for years. He wasn't afraid of what was behind those doors now. The room felt like it had its own heartbeat. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full of meaning. It felt like everyone in the space was connected by an invisible thread that the piano had gently pulled tight. Someone, who had been standing near the door, slowly sat down on the floor, resting their back against the wall. Someone sitting near the front shifted closer, just a little, without making a sound. No one wanted to interrupt what was happening. He began to play a deeper sound. Not louder, but fuller. It sounded like rain falling slowly outside, like footsteps in an empty hallway. Like breathing in and out after a long, hard day. His thoughts grew softer. The noise inside his mind slowed down. The worries that usually crowded his head stepped back and gave him space. For once, his mind wasn't racing. It was walking. He thought about how many times people go through life without being truly seen. How many times people smile while feeling empty inside. How many times silence becomes heavier than words. Now, that silence felt different. It felt safe. Someone in the room gently placed their hands over their heart, as if the sound had reached something deep. Another person rested their head against the back of their chair and slowly closed their eyes. There were no tears falling loudly, no dramatic reactions. Everything was soft, real, controlled. It felt like the kind of healing that happens quietly when no one is looking. He let the notes stretch out a little longer. He let the pauses breathe. He let the music rest between moments, like it was learning when to speak and when to stay silent. His back was straight now. His hands moved without fear. The bench didn't feel hard anymore. The keys didn't feel cold. Everything felt more alive, more present. He realized he had stopped thinking about how long it had been. Time didn't exist in that moment. There was no clock, no schedule, only sound and feeling. People around him had changed. You could see it without anyone saying anything. Their faces looked softer. Their bodies looked lighter. The room felt warmer without the temperature changing. Someone slowly leaned their head against a nearby shoulder. Someone else crossed their arms loosely, not to protect themselves, but to hold themselves steady. He played a sequence of notes that felt like a question and an answer at the same time. It sounded like longing and peace living together. And the room understood. He could feel it in the air. The shared understanding, the shared silence, the shared humanity. The piano no longer felt like an object. It felt like a voice. Like an old friend who had been waiting patiently to be heard. He remembered the version of himself he used to be. The one who dreamed. The one who believed in small joys. The one who found comfort in quiet things. That version of him was sitting there now. He felt whole, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. A faint shift happened in the room. Not visible, but emotional. It felt like everyone had reached a place inside themselves they had been afraid to visit. No one wanted to move. No one wanted to break the moment. He played more slowly now, letting each note fall like a soft step on a quiet path. The music felt like walking home after a long journey. Someone quietly exhaled, like they had been holding their breath for years. Someone else adjusted their seat gently, trying not to disturb the air. The room felt sacred, even though it wasn't a special place. It wasn't a church. It wasn't a stage. It was just a normal room made special by honesty. He didn't know how long he had been playing. He didn't care. All he knew was that something inside him felt lighter than it had in years, and the room felt it too. His fingers began to slow. Not because he was tired, but because something inside him felt complete. The music didn't need to say more. It had already spoken everything his heart had been carrying for years. The last few notes came out soft and steady, like the final steps of a long walk. They weren't sad. They weren't loud. They were calm, like the feeling of sitting quietly after a storm has passed. When the final sound faded, the room didn't rush back into noise. No one moved right away. No one spoke. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of feeling, full of connection, full of quiet respect. He rested his hands in his lap. For the first time, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel invisible. He felt like he belonged, not because people were staring at him, but because they understood him without words around him. People slowly came back to their bodies, their breath, their thoughts. Someone took a slow breath in through their nose and let it out gently. Someone shifted in their seat but did so quietly, like they didn't want to disturb the air. A person near the back of the room offered a soft smile, not wide, not loud, just warm. That smile said more than words ever could. He stood up slowly from the bench. The movement felt different this time, lighter, stronger, like he was standing in his own skin without shame. No one clapped right away. It wasn't that kind of moment. It wasn't a performance. It was something shared. Something honest then. Softly, one person brought their hands together. Not loud, not for attention. Just a simple, gentle clap. Another person joined. Then another. Soon, the sound of soft clapping filled the room. It wasn't wild or dramatic. It was full of quiet appreciation. He nodded slightly. Not as someone proud, but as someone grateful. Grateful that he had been brave enough to press that first key. Grateful that the room had listened. As people slowly began to move again, their energy was different. They weren't rushing. They weren't tense. They carried something softer in their steps. Some looked at him as they passed, not with curiosity, but with understanding. Like they saw a part of themselves in him. He walked a few steps away from the piano, then paused. He looked back at it one last time. It didn't look old now. It didn't look forgotten. It looked alive. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. The moment would stay with him long after he left the room. People returned to their phones, their bags, their thoughts. But the heaviness that had once filled the room was gone. In its place was something quiet and warm. As he walked toward the exit, he felt taller without being taller. He felt stronger without proving anything. He felt real. Outside the room, the world was the same. The noise, the movement, the rush. But inside him, something had changed forever. He had touched something honest inside himself, and because of that, he had touched something honest in everyone else too. He stepped out with slow, steady steps, and he carried the music with him. Even after the sound was gone, he didn't realize at first that what happened in that room would stay with him long after he walked out. At the time, it felt like a quiet moment that would gently fade from memory. But days passed, and that soft music still played somewhere deep inside him. The world outside didn't slow down for him. Buses still rushed by. People still walked past without looking. Work still demanded energy. Life still asked for strength. But something inside him had shifted. A quiet strength had taken root. He noticed it in small moments. When he waited in line and didn't feel as impatient, when he walked under the open sky and actually looked up instead of staring at the ground, when he sat alone at night and felt peaceful instead of empty, that single moment at the piano had reminded him that he was still alive inside. One afternoon, he found himself walking past a small public space. Inside, there was another old piano sitting against a wall. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't polished, but it looked like it had a story to tell. He stopped. People walked past him without noticing. Just like before, he felt that quiet pull in his chest. This time he didn't hesitate as long. He walked inside and sat down. The bench felt familiar. The keys felt like they were waiting for him. He didn't think about who was watching. He didn't think about being judged. He just placed his fingers down gently and played a soft note. The sound filled the small space. A child nearby turned their head. A tired-looking worker paused near the doorway. A person on their phone slowly lowered the screen. It was happening again. But this time, it wasn't about him. He began to realize that the piano wasn't just a way for him to release his feelings. It was a way to share peace with strangers who didn't even know they needed it. Each note he played felt like a small gift. Something simple. Something free. People didn't clap loudly. They didn't gather around him. But they did something more powerful. They stayed. They breathed slower. They smiled softly, and he saw it. He saw how tired people looked, how heavy their shoulders were, how quiet their eyes felt. And through the sound, he felt like he was giving them permission to rest for a moment. He didn't become famous. Nobody recorded him. There were no bright lights. But he felt something better. He felt useful. He started to make this a habit. Sometimes in quiet public places, sometimes in empty spaces that held forgotten pianos, he never announced himself. He never asked for attention. He just played over time. He noticed how he started to change. He smiled more. He walked lighter. He listened better. He became softer, without becoming weak. People in his life began to notice something different about him. They couldn't explain it. They just said he seemed calmer, kinder, more present. And maybe he was. One evening, he returned to the very first room where it all started. The same plain walls, the same soft lights, the same tired air. He walked to the piano. This time it wasn't dusty in his eyes. It looked like it belonged. He sat down and played. Again, but the room didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt alive. He understood. Something that night he didn't change the room. The music didn't change the room. Honesty changed the room, he learned. That simple moments, simple sounds, and simple courage could reach places nothing else could. And as he walked away, once again he realized something quietly powerful. Sometimes, a simple touch. E senti. Just a sound. Sometimes, it's a reminder that people are still here, still feeling, still human. He started to understand that what he was doing wasn't just about music anymore. It was about presence, about showing up in a world that felt like it was always in a hurry. His hands moved across the keys in a way that felt like breathing. Natural, quiet, alive some days. He didn't feel like playing. Some days the world felt too loud, too heavy again. But even on those days when he sat near a piano, something inside him settled. Like his body remembered peace before his mind did. One morning, he walked into a small train station. People rushed by with bags, tired faces, and quick steps. In the corner sat a forgotten upright piano. Its wood was worn. One of the keys stuck slightly, but it was still waiting. He sat down. He played a single soft note. A person standing near the ticket machine paused for just a second. A parent walking with a child slowed their steps. A worker holding a coffee stopped staring into space and tilted their head slightly. The music pushed gently against the rush of life, not to stop it, but to remind it to breathe. His fingers moved without effort now. He didn't have to think. He didn't worry about mistakes. Every small flaw in the sound felt like part of the truth. Real life was never perfect, and neither was his music. Across the station, someone sat down on a bench instead of rushing to move again. Someone near the window leaned against the wall and closed their eyes for a short moment. Nobody said anything. Nobody needed to. He watched faces soften. He watched shoulders dropped. He watched busy hands become still. And in those quiet moments, he understood something very clear. People were tired. Not physically tired, soul tired. And his music wasn't fixing them. It was giving them permission to pause. Later that day, he walked through a hospital hallway. The lights were bright. The air smelled clean. The floor shined. People walked slowly there. Carefully at the end of the hallway sat another piano. He wasn't supposed to disturb anyone, so he played so softly that the sound barely traveled. Still, people felt it. A nurse standing near a door rested their back against the wall for a second longer. A person waiting in a chair stopped tapping their fingers. An older man lifted his eyes from the floor and looked toward the faint sound. No big reaction, no drama, just quiet relief. He realized then that he wasn't just walking into rooms anymore. He was walking into hearts. He began to see the world differently. Not as a fast place that ignored people, but as a tired place filled with people doing their best. He didn't judge them. Anymore, he didn't feel separate from them. He felt part of them. One evening, he sat alone near a river. There was no piano there, just water, wind, and the sound of life moving on, but he could still hear music inside himself, and he smiled because he didn't need keys to feel peace anymore. He had learned how to carry it. He had learned how to share it. He had learned how to be still. The world didn't change, but he did. And sometimes that is enough. Over time, he stopped thinking of himself as someone special. He didn't feel like a performer or a helper. He just felt like a person moving through the world with open hands instead of closed fists. That change happened quietly, without him even noticing when it started. One evening, he walked through a small neighborhood where the streets were narrow and the lights were warm. People sat on steps. Someone walked a dog slowly. A bicycle rolled past in a calm way. It was the kind of place where life felt soft, not rushed. In the corner of a small community building, he saw a piano through the open doorway. The paint around the door was chipped, and the floor was worn from many footsteps. It looked like a place full of stories. He stood there for a moment, unsure if he should go in. This felt more personal than public spaces. This felt like entering someone's quiet world, but he walked in anyway. Inside, a few people sat at tables talking softly. Nobody was loud. Nobody seemed stressed. Just normal people living normal lives. Someone looked up at him and gave a small nod. Not asking questions. Not judging. Just welcoming. He sat at the piano and let his hands rest on the keys. He didn't feel nervous. He didn't feel pressure. He just felt present. When he played, the sound didn't travel far, but it didn't need to. It stayed inside the room like a warm blanket. The people in the room didn't stop what they were doing right away. They slowly felt it instead of reacting to it. Their voices became quieter. Their movements slowed. One person placed their cup down gently. Another shifted their chair closer. Someone leaned their elbows on the table and listened without making it obvious. He started to feel something new. Not sadness, not relief. Something deeper. Belonging. He had walked through cities and stations and hallways, but this small room gave him a feeling he didn't know he was missing. He wasn't an outsider playing music here. He was part of the room. His fingers moved as if they understood that. The notes sounded warmer than usual, softer, like they were carrying gratitude instead of pain. He noticed someone smiling while pretending not to listen. Someone else tapping their foot very gently under the table. Nobody was trying to show emotion. They were just being human. He realized he wasn't only helping others. Others were helping him too. By listening, by staying, by being there. He played for a long time. But it didn't feel long. When he stopped, nobody clapped. And that made him smile. They didn't clap because they didn't see him as a performer. They saw him as a person. Someone walked over and quietly said, "Thank you." Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. He nodded, and we felt a small warmth spread inside him. As he walked out into the quiet street, he felt lighter than usual. Not because people had praised him, but because he had shared something real. He walked slowly, letting the night air touch his face. The stars were faint but present. For the first time, he felt like he had a place in the world that wasn't based on achievement, money, or success. Just presence. Just honesty, just sound. He didn't need the world to notice him. He just needed to feel connected. And now, he did. He started to understand that the world was full of quiet rooms. Not just rooms with walls, but emotional rooms inside people. Places where feelings were locked away. Places where tired thoughts lived in silence. He didn't set out to open those places. But somehow, through simple sound, he kept reaching them. One afternoon, he found himself in a small library. The floor creaked softly under his steps. The air smelled like old pages and calm memories. People sat in corners, reading, or staring quietly into space. Near the far wall stood a piano that looked older than the building itself. Its surface was covered in small scratches, and its bench had marks of time. He hesitated. A library felt even more delicate than the other places he'd visited. Silence wasn't just respected there. It was protected. But his hands felt called to the keys. He sat down slowly and pressed one note. Not loud, not echoing. Just soft enough to blend with the quiet turning of pages. A nearby chair shifted slightly as someone adjusted their sitting. A person at a table lifted their head slowly. The room didn't feel disturbed. It felt touched, he continued, barely above a whisper in sound. The music blended with the environment. It didn't feel like an interruption. It felt like something that had been missing. He started to feel that he wasn't alone in caring about quiet things. The people in that room understood stillness the way he did. He saw tired eyes soften, shoulders relax. Someone closed their book for a moment and stared at nothing, like they were resting their mind. The piano was giving them a safe place to think without thinking. He played slowly. Every note spaced out. Every sound carefully placed, like footsteps across a sleeping house in his mind. He wasn't thinking about life problems or worries. He was thinking about how strange it was that simple things could feel so deep. How one soft sound could make a crow. The feeling stayed with him, even when he wasn't sitting in front of a piano. It followed him when he walked through quiet streets. It sat beside him when he rode empty buses. It rested in his chest when the world felt heavy. He had found something he didn't even know he was looking for. One slow afternoon, rain began to fall softly. The kind of rain that didn't rush, but moved gently, like it had time. He walked under a small roof near a public square and watched droplets hit the ground. Each drop made a small sound, simple, honest. Across the square sat another piano, placed under a cover. Someone had left it there for anyone to use. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't clean. But it felt like it belonged. He felt a quiet pull in his chest again. He walked over and lifted the cover carefully. The wood looked older than the last one. The keys were worn differently, like many kinds of hands had touched them over the years. He sat down and waited for a moment. He listened to the rain. He listened to the wind. He listened to his breathing. Then he played. The sound mixed with the rain. It didn't fight it. It didn't cover it. It walked beside it. A person passing by slowed their steps. Someone waiting under an umbrella stayed a little longer. A pair of tired eyes lifted from the wet ground. He felt something new happen inside him. He stopped feeling like someone who was just passing through places. He started feeling like he was part of them. The music matched the rain, quiet, soft, slow. He thought about how strange it was that rain could fall for free, that the sky didn't ask for anything in return. It just gave, and maybe without realizing it, he had started doing the same. He was no longer waiting for something back. He wasn't looking for approval. He wasn't looking for fame. He was simply giving. A person stood nearby with hands in their pockets, listening without needing to show it. Another leaned against a wall and let their shoulders drop. The rain fell steadily, and for once, life felt slow. Later that week, he sat in a small hallway outside a quiet office. The lights buzzed softly overhead. People walked past with folders, phones, tired steps. At the far end of the hallway was a small piano. He played again, not for attention, not for comfort, just because it felt like breathing. People didn't stop walking completely. They just walked softer, slower, like they understood something fragile was happening. He started to realize that even if nobody ever spoke about what he was doing, it still mattered. Soft moments don't need loud proof. They just need to exist. One night he sat alone in his room. No piano, no people. No sound, and yet the quiet felt full. He could still hear music inside himself. Not real sound, but feeling. He lay back and looked at the ceiling. And for once, he didn't feel lost. He felt whole, even without noise, even without applause, even without words. He had learned to be still. He had learned to be gentle. He had learned to be human. And he knew now that this wasn't something that would end. It was a way of living. And he wasn't afraid of that anymore. W.D. Ed. Heart feel less crowded. He began to wonder how many people in the IE world were carrying too much and never getting a chance to set it down, and in that moment he felt proud. Not proud in a loud way. Proud in a quiet, personal way. He was offering something gentle in a harsh world. When he finally stopped, nobody reacted loudly. A few people glanced at him. Someone nodded slightly. Another gave a faint half-dash smile. It felt like being thanked by silence. Later that evening, he sat on a bench outside. He watched people walk past. Couples walking hand in hand. Someone scrolling their phone. Someone rubbing tired eyes. He could still feel the library's calm inside him. He realized something. Knew that day he didn't need to chase big moments. He didn't need big crowds. Big stages were never meant for him. He was meant for quiet corners. He was meant for tired hearts. He was meant for moments no one would ever record, and he was okay with that. As the sky darkened, he felt peace settle into his bones. Not happiness. Not excitement. Just peace. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that stays, the kind that lasts. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The strange thing was that he stopped thinking of the piano as an object. It started to feel like a doorway. A doorway into himself. A doorway into others. A doorway into quiet parts of the world that most people never stop to notice. He didn't go looking for stages or crowds. He looked for empty corners. Places where people felt tired but didn't talk about it. Places where life felt too loud and too fast. One morning, he walked into a small cafe. The smell of coffee sat heavy in the air. Cups clinked softly. Voices murmured in slow tones. In the corner, tucked between two walls, sat a piano that looked like it belonged to another time. Some of the keys were slightly yellowed. The wood was scratched, but it was still ready. He sat down without thinking too much. He didn't need to impress anyone. He wasn't there for attention. He was there because his hands felt like it had something gentle to give. He touched the keys lightly. The sound mixed with the sound of cups being placed on tables. Mixed with soft footsteps. Mixed with the quiet hum of conversation. A person standing in line stopped rocking back and forth. Someone stirring their drink slowed their hand. A quiet shift moved through the room like a soft wind. He played slowly. There were no hard feelings in the sound. No anger, no sadness. Just honesty. He noticed something new that day. People didn't just listen with their ears. They listened with their shoulders, with their hands, with their breathing. When the music felt safe, their bodies showed it. As he played, he thought about how many people walk around every day pretending to be okay, smiling in front of others, holding together things that feel like they are breaking inside. He wasn't saving anyone. He was just giving them a quiet place to rest. After a while, he felt ready to stop. Not because he was tired, but because the moment had found its natural end. The room didn't rush back to life. It gently restarted. Someone gave him a soft thank you. Someone else simply nodded. He stepped outside. With warm air touching his face, he realized he didn't feel alone. Anymore, not because people were around him, but because he felt connected to something. Deeper, he felt connected to human. Quiet to human tiredness, to human hope. That evening, he sat by a window and looked outside. He watched lights flicker on in distant buildings. He watched shadows move. He wasn't searching for more. He was grateful for what he had, and he knew something. It's important. It wasn't about changing the world, it was about softening it, one note at a time.